Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Spivak. You know, after the kind of year we've had, I was thinking about what would be appropriate to say at this Chomer Ladrush. And many Chazal came to my mind, some of which I intend to use, but the first thing that came to my mind, strangely enough, was an old saying my bubby from Riga, he used to say, when things got bad, when it was a depressing time, when there was illness, chas v'shalom, as we have in our world today, my bubby would come up with a statement, Azay yorach meine sonim. My enemies should have a year like this. My enemies should have a year like this. And I'm sure that many of us out there think that after the pandemic and after the economic crisis and after the rioting in the streets and all the things that have gone wrong, we may not articulate it the way my bubby did, but many of us are thinking on some level, Azay yorach meine sonim. My enemies should have a year like this year. And as we come to the end of the year, we have to ask ourselves, what does all these things mean? Why, for the first time in a century, do we have a pandemic? It's affecting millions of people. Why, at the same time, are all the other things happening? The first Chazal, or the first words of our great sages in recent times, the first words come from a little muddy town in Poland, Rodin, where a very, very short man with a high voice named Rabbi Meir Kagan, known to the world as the Chafetz Chaim, came up to us in his writings in 1895, and he talked about, quote, unquote, natural disasters. That he says, so have we heard about all the awful things that are happening lately in our world. Kamo Ashetef Hanora ba'Amerika u'Ashkenaz u'B'chol Medina u'Medina. Like the floods that are happening in America and in Germany and in every country. Mikri mumu'uros ka'elu ad shetitzalna oznei hashamei, such horrible things that makes the listener's ears ring. And then the Chafetz Chaim says, words of brilliance. God forbid we should think that this is just an akroi ba'alma, an occurrence, a general occurrence, an accidental occurrence. It was nothing behind it. Chalila, says the Chafetz Chaim. We should never believe that. And we in our generation should not believe that the pandemic is something that happened just accidentally. Now they're saying it came out of the earth. Was it an accident? Or was there more to it? What message do we take away? And says the Chafetz Chaim, in 1895, around that time, he wrote this, Ki aleinu ladas, because we have to know, Sha'HaKadosh Baruch Hu melech adon al kol ha'aretz, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the master of all the world. And not by accident or just out of coincidentally do these things happen. Rather, it is a warning from heaven. To we lowly man who are on this earth. That these mankind has to do tshuva, repent for all the terrible things that he did. Ki einonu batuchin chas v'sholom mitzoros ko'ela chadoma. Because we, without tshuva, we are very vulnerable. We have no security at all in things like this. It is an amazing thought. We live in a world that has taken God out of the courts, out of the public school systems, because this is a warning, not only to Am Yisrael, but to the Jewish, to the Numos, all the nations of the world as well. And this warning is, we have to understand that God created a world with a teva, with a natural order of things, with a belief in God and natural relationships between human beings. And when we live with the teva can go with us. Even Yetzias Mitzrayim, even the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Yamsuf, Chazal imply was that it was a part of a nature. Because it was the nature of the Jewish people to be free, the nature of the world that Am Yisrael would get Torah, and therefore it was also a part of the nature. As the Yamsuf shpolta, that the sea should split. So when we go with the teva goes with us. But Rabbi say, when we go against the teva, when we go against nature, then nature goes against us. At this time, it is not clear how this thing started, whether it was in a laboratory in Wuhan in China, but most of the scientists are leaning to the fact it just came out naturally out of the ground. It came out of the ground. This COVID-19 came out of the ground and wrecked our economy and did cause people not to have money and rioting, all the kinds of things that happened because of the fact that we changed the nature. All the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted from us, we changed. This is no good, and this Torah law is no good, and this is no good, and we'll do this and we'll do that, and we're going to go against nature. And then when you do that, nature goes against you. Chalila. Chalila. Now, this is a perfect time of year to do tshuva. Chodesh Elul is coming. It's here. Perfect time to do tshuva. And that's what can turn things around. I want to talk not only about Am Yisrael doing tshuva, but the entire world. The world had Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noachite commandments, and one of them was not to kill. And the most incredible thing here is this. There's a pasuk in Bamidbar, Lamed Gimel, that says, it's talking about Eretz Yisrael, but I believe it means in general. That when a murder takes place, the ground upon which that murder took place will not be forgiven for the blood that is spilled in it, except by bringing the murderer to justice and executing him. That is what has to happen. And it's an old story, but it keeps coming up again and again. Are you aware of the fact that Auschwitz had 8,000 people running it? And only 800 were ever prosecuted. That means that 90% of the people, many of them murderers, on-hands murderers of children and women and innocent people and elderly, were never brought to justice. The ground of the earth was never forgiven for the blood that was spilled in it. Never. And the ground, And what happened in Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials were a dog and pony show. Even the prosecutors admitted, we have it on in film, we didn't bring anywhere near the people that killed to justice. Nazi generals became heads of NATO. The heads of banks were people who ran concentration camps. Murderers went free. We were only interested in one thing, in getting what we wanted, the whole world. Let me grab this Nazi scientist. Let me grab this one. We grew up in a world in which Wernher von Braun, a Nazi scientist, was praised as the head of the American space program, a man who in Peenemünde and other places used Jewish slave labor to build his rockets to rain down on London and kill the innocent civilian population. So the land is not forgiven until you spill the blood, you execute the murderers. So why now all of a sudden? Why now? If you notice, the last of the Nazis are dying out, and there's no way to bring them to justice. So the justice must be meted out on the entire world. The entire world. The Mefarshim say that the reason that Shimon and Levi were supposed to destroy the city of Shechem is because Shechem never brought Shechem to justice, never brought him to justice. And one of the ideas of Shem Mitzvah B'nai Noach is to make, but they didn't do it. So the whole city was Chayav Misa. I'm not saying the world is Chayav Misa, but the world is Chayav a punishment for never bringing justice to these people. Never. And the world is Chayav for changing the teva of the world. And the Chafetz Chaim says, don't think the Chalila, don't think that these that it was the hand of just an accidental occurrence. Just happened. It happens. Stuff happens. That's not what it is. But we can change it, because even though we can't bring those people to justice, we can do mass tshuva in the world. And mass tshuva in the world will bring people back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and will cause the world to heal. And that's what we must have, a world that heals. And that's what we have to do tshuva for. That's what we have to stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask for tshuva for the B'nai Noach, and Al Kain Zichrono Bo Lefanecha. I translated, therefore, we plead for him. We plead for the nations of the world. Mi b'cherba, mi b'mayim, mi b'eshu, mi b'atzama. This year we feel it more than ever. And the words of the Chafetz Chaim from that little muddy town of Rodin in Poland, more than 120 years ago, come ringing down in our ears. Now is the time for tshuva. We've muffed a lot of chances, but we still have one on the tshuva of Chodesh Elul, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. Rabbi say, Seid gesund litraut, Shalom al Yisrael. And most of all, my friend, Chazak.